you've come to be with us. In this evening's lesson, I'd like to continue with the lesson that we were studying last Sunday night, dealing with God's control over his universe. And we looked at a number of passages that show that God indeed created the universe according to his will and for his purpose, and that he has designed it in such a way that he could accomplish his purpose through the natural laws that God has made. And that's what we talk about by providence. God works through natural means to carry out his will and to answer prayer and to shape things according to his purpose. And we were looking at God's control over the natural order of the universe and natural laws and different wonders around the world that God has made. And we were looking specifically at the book of Job. And Job had questioned whether God was really the moral governor of the universe as he was going through his trials. He had some weak moments in which he challenged God's judgment and rule because he had done no sin to deserve the punishment that he had received, that his friends were accusing him of. And then God appears to Job in a whirlwind at the end of the book and begins to question Job about all the things that he had made and that he has planned and controlled, and whether Job knows anything about these things or has any power like God to be able to control these things. And of course, in all the things that God mentions, Job has to confess these things are too great for Job. Job doesn't know anything about all of these natural wonders and the creation and how God did it. And he has no right to be questioning God's rule of the universe, and that he should just humbly keep his mouth shut and let God run the universe. And that's what, of course, we all should do. Put our trust in God, wait on God, understand he has things well in hand, and that according to his purpose, things are going to work out for our good if we love him and keep his commandments. Well, we were looking at a number of natural phenomena that are mentioned in Job, and we ran out of time about chapter 38, verse 25 through 30. And he asked Job, who has cleft a channel for the flood, or a way for the thunderbolt, to bring rain on a land without people, on a desert without a man in it, to satisfy the waste and desolate land, to make the seeds of grass to sprout? Has the rain a father, or who has begotten the drops of dew? From whose womb has come the ice and the frost of heaven? And who has given it birth? Water becomes hard like stone, and the surface of the deep is imprisoned. So here in the book of Job, he's living back about probably the time of Abraham and the days of the patriarchs, not long after the flood had happened. Abraham's 10 generations from the flood. And so there are many things that Job talks about in this book, or that God speaks to him about, that would be, much closer to what happened immediately after the flood. He says, who has told anything about how God makes lightning and how God brings rain with lightning? This is something wasn't discovered till many centuries later, that it is the lightning that brings the rain. You have all of this moisture in the air, and you have to get it to condense on a nucleus of dust or some kind of particle that's in the air, so all of those water drops can get together and form rain. And the electricity in a storm causes that to happen. And lightning, you see lightning, you know we're probably going to get some rain, right? Once that lightning is there. God's the one that decides all that. He set all that up according to his orders. I think I heard a quote the other day on one of the weather channels. They were saying it lightnings 1,000 times a second all over the world. And without that lightning, there wouldn't be rain in every place. And there wouldn't be rain out even where there aren't any people. And God's watering that, taking care of those animals out there. He's got this whole system set up, and it all works according to his order and design. He has created water with the nature that it has to where it can exist in these different states of a liquid or gas, or it can be turned to a solid. And it has, in unusual attributes that God has given it that makes life possible because of that water that's on the earth. You can transport it from the sea up to the mountains and have it rain on the land and water it. It can turn to ice, but before it does so, it gets less dense. Or is it more dense? More dense, and it sinks, right? You always hear about the lakes turning over and the ocean turning over. What if it sunk to the bottom and then froze on the bottom and froze from the bottom up? Everything would be ice, right? But God has designed water where it doesn't do that. And there's not much explanation on a lot of these things as why they work the way they do. But God, in his great wisdom, has designed all of these things. Isn't it something that Job would talk about the sea freezing over and imprisoning things? Maybe show that the ice age just wasn't that long. It happened after the flood, and it hadn't been that long that Job could remember things about it. And maybe there were still some effects of that cold weather going on the earth, that he would see things imprisoned in his day in ice. The Lord in the animated creation. We looked at inanimate creation. There's many things described and talked about concerning the natural creatures that God has made and how he has built instincts and training into these animals so that they can survive. And it's God's providence and control over the universe that provides for all these things. Can you hunt the prey for the lion or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens and lie in wait in their lair? God's the one that teaches the lioness how to hunt. They know all about that hunting and go out and take care of all of their young, and it's all programmed into them. They have those animal instincts that God's given them to provide for their young. It wasn't any of us that can hunt prey for the lion. The raven, who prepares for the raven its nourishment when its young cry to God and wander about without food. Who feeds the birds? Our God and Father in heaven, he cares for the birds, and he makes sure they have what they need. And he's programmed them with the instincts and the different skills that they need to provide for their young when they cry to him. He talks about the goat and the deer and the wild donkey in chapter 39. It says, do you know the time that the mountain goat gives birth? And do you observe the calving of the deer? We might have our domesticated animals that we know all about, how long it's going to take and what happens. God's taking care of all these wild animals that are out there on the hillside and knows all about the gestation period for these different wild animals and what they need and how to provide for them. The wild donkey. There's certain creatures, we have a domesticated version that you can put to labor and to work and you can get all of this good out of. And then there's a wild species. How good of an animal tamer you are, nobody can make them work. And God knows all about that. He knows about the wild donkey that lives out there that wants to be free, and there's no way you're going to make it your servant. It says, who sent out the wild donkey? Who set it free? And who looses the bonds of the swift donkey that lives out in the wilderness and you can't tame in any way? It talks about the ostrich and all of its unique characteristics that bird has. And you can see how widespread these animals were in Job's time. I mean, they had a lot of animals we kind of associate with Africa and stuff today. They're living up there where Job's at, so not that long after the flood. These animals are spread out, but they're more evenly distributed, I guess, than today. The ostrich wings flap joyously with the pinions and plumage of love, and she abandons her eggs to the earth and warms them in the dust, and she forgets that a foot may crush them, or that a wild beast may trample them. She treats her young cruelly, as if they were not hers, and though her labor be in vain, she is unconcerned, because God has made her forget wisdom, and has not given her a share of understanding. And when she lifts up herself on high, she laughs at the horse and its rider. So these ostriches, from man's point of view, they lay their eggs out on the ground. Some of them are left even for the young to eat later. It's one of the things that they do. They're sort of like these killdeer birds that'll like run off and leave their young, it looks like sometimes, like they don't care for them. In order to get predators to chase them, they do that. And it says even though they don't have all the wisdom in the world, an ostrich, she laughs at a horse and its rider. They can run up to 40 miles an hour when they're going full speed. So even a horse can't catch them for those short bursts of speed that they have. So God made those animals, and even though it has all of those pinions and plumage, and it looks a lot like other birds, but it can't fly. God makes them all uniquely, and He controls all of the things about their habits. He talks about the horse and praises the war horse and its great courage that it has when the trumpet blows. Do you give the horse his might? You know, if you could design something like a horse, I mean, it's a great animal. And I mean, you look at it and you go, that's made to ride. And people have used it that way all over to great effect. Did you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like the locust? His majestic snorting is terrible. He paws the valley. He rejoices in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. And he does not turn back from the sword. The quiver rattles against him, and flashing spear and javelin. With shaking and rage, he races over the ground, and he does not stand still at the voice of the trumpet. As often as the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" And he scents the battle from afar, and thunder of the captains and the war cry. Well, it is amazing how these, the soldiers are filled with fear, but the horse takes off and goes into the battle and pulls the chariot or goes with the horsemen and goes into the face of battle. Force to be able to do those things. And the hawk and the eagle, you think about where they place their nest and how far they can see with their eyes. I mean, we see hawks circling the sky all the time around here, and they're looking down there, they're seeing all the little, mice and everything that they want to go and get from a great height. They're able to see those things. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and stretches his wings towards the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the cliff he dwells and lodges, upon the rocky crag, an inaccessible place. For there he spies out food. His eye sees it from afar. His young ones also suck up blood. And where the slain are, there is he. Think about all of these scavenger birds that are able to, anything dies, they don't have any time at all till they're there to eat things up. God designed it all, and He controls it all, and is able to know all about it. Job and none of us know all of the secrets about the animals and why they're able to do the things they do. We make progress through science and study and so on, but still there are great mysteries about the animal world that God knows everything about because He made them. So Job gains a greater understanding of God and why it is that he should not sit in judgment of God no matter what his circumstances are. God's in control, and He knows what He's doing, and Job shouldn't be presumptuous to try to sit in judgment of God. Then the Lord said to Job, "Will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? Let him who reproves God answer it." And then Job answered the Lord and said, "Behold, I am insignificant. What can I reply to thee? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I have spoken, and I will not answer, even twice, and I will add no more." He confesses he is nobody compared to God. Man has no place questioning God's rule of the world and God's rule over the universe. The one who has all of this wisdom that made all things, we should not question God. He knows what He's doing, and He's working things out in a proper way. So God gives Job a sarcastic challenge. And again, He's trying to humble him because He loves Job. God reproves those that are His children. And the Lord Jesus did the same thing. He reproves people because He loves them. He wants them to go to heaven. He wants us to see our sins and our arrogance and learn to be humble before God and do His will. So He's got through with Job. He doesn't leave it there. He's going to teach the lesson some more about what Job needs to learn. Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm and said, "Now gird up your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. Will you really annul my judgment? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? How many people do that kind of thing? Even the great Job, the best man on earth at that time, when things got tough enough on him, he ended up trying to blame God and justify himself that way. We should never do that. It's not God's fault. It's the sins of men and the consequences of men's sins that have caused all the disorder that's in the world around us. It's not God's fault. God shouldn't be questioned in his judgments over the world in order to try to get ourselves off the hook. So God invites Job to play God and see if he could do any better. Of course, there have been movies on this in there about people wanting to be God and let you run the world for a day and see how you can do. And it'd be a total flop, wouldn't it? If I was running the whole world and trying to sit in God's place, what would happen? I mean, it would be a disaster, right? God is the only one with the attributes necessary to run the universe. So he asked Job, okay, Job, you take over and run things. Or do you have an arm like God? And can you thunder with a voice like his? Adorn yourself with eminence and dignity, and clothe yourselves with honor and majesty. Pour out the overflowing of your anger, and look on everyone who is proud and make him low. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him, and tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them in the dust together. Bind them in the hidden place. Then I will also confess to you that your own right hand can save you. So God says, you take over. You think you're the one that should set everything in order in the world and punish all the wicked people that need to be punished and wipe out the wicked when they do wrong. Job, you take over. How would you like that job? And I'm going to punish all the people and give them what they deserve, and I'm going to do it right now. Isn't that the way we feel sometimes? Why doesn't God do something and take care of these wicked people? Okay, we'll let you have the job for a day and see how you do it. Then we'll see if you can save yourself. Then he begins to ask Job about some creatures that we don't have in the world today. And it's something really to think about, is what kind of creatures were still in existence at the time of Job that have gone extinct now. We know that God made all the creatures. He created everything. And he put 2 of each kind of creature on the ark. But there are thousands of different species of animals that have become extinct since the time of the ark, since the time of the flood. There are many animals in our own country that have become extinct. And even in our lifetime, there are animals going extinct all the time. Well, there were some great beasts that are examples of God's creative power that were in existence in Job's day that he uses as examples of his power and questions Job about. The first is Behemoth. He is a beast, and he uses the term like, you have El for God, and then Elohim for, to amplify God. Well, this is a beast, the biggest of beasts, the super beast that he's talking about when he talks about Behemoth. Says, behold now Behemoth, which I have made as well as you. This is a creature that lived on the earth in Job's day. He eats grass like an ox, and behold now his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He bends his tail like a cedar, and the suin of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, and his limbs are like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Let his maker bring near his sword. Well, there in many commentaries, because they are looking for some animal that exists today that they can apply this great description to. Some in the Middle Ages said it was an elephant. Many of the commentators that you read today will say it's a hippopotamus that he's talking about. But there are things about a hippopotamus and an elephant that don't fit this animal at all. It says it has a tail like a cedar tree. That doesn't fit a hippopotamus or an elephant, does it? There were some large creatures we don't know about or that aren't alive today that he's speaking of. Now, it perfectly fits the picture of some of the dinosaurs, the largest creatures that ever walked the earth. If some of them, which I think they probably were on the ark, and some of them did survive after the ark for a period of time, that Job could have seen some of these animals before they went extinct. We have a number of different pictograms and different drawings and carvings that have come down to us from the ancient world. A Mesopotamian cylinder, look at that, looks like brontosauruses right there. And they're all wrapped around on this seal that's been found from 330 BC. They seem to have seen some big behemoth of a creature that looked a lot like a brontosaurus. And certainly that would fit that description that is given. And that's not the only place that you find drawings and pictures of this behemoth type of creature. We're told as God goes on with his description, surely the mountain brings him food, and all of the beasts of the field play there. Under the lotus plants he lies down. In the covert of the reeds and the marsh, the lotus plants cover him with shade, and willows of the brook surround him. If a river rages, he is not alarmed. He is confident, though the Jordan rushes to his mouth. Can anyone capture him when he is on watch with barbs? Can anyone pierce his nose? And look, here's from 800 BC to 200 AD, there were a number of figures that were found made out of clay in Mexico. That looked like a brontosaurus, but I don't know. Back in 200 BC and somewhere in South America. Here is a hunt. This is a mosaic that's found in Italy. It shows these soldiers, and they're hunting some big beast, some big animal down in the Nile. And you have a picture here from Utah. There's a carving of an animal that an Indian made out there near Natural Bridges, Utah. You can go to the National Monument there, and there are these cave drawings. Here's another picture. Looks like a brontosaurus. That's some Indian spirit. Was behemoth something that these people saw that has gone extinct and we don't ever see in the world today? But at that ancient time when Job was around, God could talk about this great creature. There's another monster that God has made that lives in the water. And this monster is called Leviathan. And Leviathan is a creature with scales and with armor and cannot be captured by men. It's too mighty and powerful. A lot of modern commentary says talking about the Nile crocodile. That's the creature that's being spoken of. But people capture crocodiles, don't they? I mean, we go to places and you have alligator places or crocodile places, and people capture them. This seems to be something bigger than a crocodile that's described. But and of course, there are many creatures again that have gone extinct that were in the world in Job's day, in ancient times, that are not in the world now. And many ancient writers and again, sculptors and painters have given us different witness to. It says, can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook, or press down his nose with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many supplications to you, or will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him for a servant forever? Can't domesticate this creature. Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you bind him for your maidens? Will the traders bargain over him? Will they divide him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with a fishing spear? Lay your hand on him and remember the battle. You will not do it again. Behold, your expectation is false. Will you be laid low even in the sight of him? No one is so fierce that he dares to rouse him. Who then is he that can stand before me? So some people describe this creature as maybe possibly some of these deep sea type of dinosaurs that were left over after the flood. There are also some sea crocodiles that we found the bones of that are gigantic. Maybe it's that kind of alligator, but not a regular kind of crocodile. And of course, there's all kinds of stories from the ancient world about these sea serpents and monsters that they would run into. And again, there are many different pictures that have come down from ancient people about some kind of great lizard that they had to deal with. In verses 11 through 21, who has given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. I will not keep silent concerning his limbs, or his mighty strength, or his orderly frame. Who can strip off his outer armor? Who can come within his double mail? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth there is terror. His strengths, his strong scales are his pride, shut up as with a tight seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. He sneezes, flashes forth light, or like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils smoke goes forth, as from a boiling pot, and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes forth from his mouth. Now, it describes a creature that certainly people, you hear stories about fire-breathing dragons. Isn't that what the picture is of this creature? That he has, when he snorts, it looks like, there's fire going out of his nostrils. I think about, I don't know, I guess you see whales and things shooting stuff out of their nose up into the air. But people say, wow, fire-breathing animal? Well, we have, don't we have different snakes and serpents that can shoot poison out at you and blind you? We have bombardier beetle can mix those chemicals together and make an explosion in order to escape from its predators. Things in nature that take place that God has designed. But this creature is described in a very dramatic way there. There are all kinds of stories that have come down from history, whether it's in England or Germany, Beowulf, that whole story, or the stories about dragons in England and Wales and different places that men went out and killed in the wilderness or protected people in the city from. There are stories about great lizards all over the world that have come down. They call them dragons. In China, they have all their dragons over there they talk about. All kinds of drawings of dragons that have been down. If you were going to draw a dinosaur before anybody ever found any dinosaur bones, what would you describe a dragon as? What would you call it? Here's a carving over in Southeast Asia that's in one of their ancient temples. Doesn't that look like a dinosaur with the spikes on his back and it's carved for their decoration? Where did they get the idea to ever carve that creature? I know we can look in our dinosaur books today and find stuff like that based on the bones. Where did they get the idea? There's a pictograph of some kind of a maybe duck-billed dinosaur or something that some of the Indians in the Southwest drew along with the buffalo and other things on the walls. Sounds a lot like some of the things Job is describing. In his neck lodges strength, and dismay leaps before him. The folds of his flesh are joined together, firm on him and immovable. His heart is as hard as stone, even as hard as the lower millstone. When he rises himself up, the mighty fear. Because of the crashing, they are bewildered. This animal, whatever it was, when it comes crashing along on the ground, it terrifies everybody. Shakes the ground when it comes. It says the sword that reaches him cannot avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He regards iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned into stubble for him. Clubs are regarded as stubble. He laughs at the rattling of the javelin. Here's some more of these figurines that were found down there in Mexico. And they show people with dinosaurs and even some of these water dinosaurs. And of course, people want to reject them, but there's lot of evidence they're old. That it was ancient people that shaped those things. We have different stones that have carvings on them that have been found in Iceland. And they've got pictures of dinosaurs on them. The internet, you can't, things that used to be kept secret and hidden away in the back of the museum, a lot of these things now, they're out where people can see them. It says his underparts are like sharp potshears. He spreads out like a threshing sled on the mire. He makes the depths boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a jar of ointment. Behind him, he makes a way to shine. One would think the deep to be gray hair. Nothing on earth like him. One made without fear. He looks on everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. So whatever Leviathan is, he was a great creature that was in the sea and in the marsh, and that people couldn't capture or do anything with. There were some people that are missionaries over in Australia. In the rainforest there, they described a creature that used to live in the waters there. And he asked them to draw a picture of what it looked like. You can see looks like one of these dinosaurs you see in a dinosaur book that used to live there in that rainforest. And in those pits of water that were there. Of course, we hear stories about these kind of creatures all over the world in different lakes and so on that people have talked about. This is down in a Mayan temple, and it shows the different kinds of gifts they're bringing as sacrifices. You got a dinosaur right in the middle of that. What was that? Why did they draw that? This is from the gates of Babylon. They were drawing a picture there of illustrating a dragon that was pictured on their walls there. So, what kind of creatures were around in Job's day that aren't around in our day? Recognize God's power and wisdom and purpose. And Job hears all of these descriptions of the things that God has made and the powerful things that he's witnessed in these different animals. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Talking about himself. Therefore I have declared that which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear now, and I will speak, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I retract, and I repent in dust and ashes. So after God had spoke to him, Job had heard about God. The truth about God had been handed down through the faithful people from the time of Noah. And Job lived a faithful and righteous life, and he went through these terrible trials. And he said some things about God that weren't true. And now he repents, and he retracts it. And he realizes now that he can see God and not just hear about God from other people, how mighty and great God is. That he is the God of providence and the one that controls all the laws of nature and the one that he should submit to. And of course, we should as well. Well, I hope that you find these things interesting and help us all to come to the same conclusion that Job did, that we need to humbly serve the God of nature, the God that controls all the laws of the universe, and depend upon his providence and trust in his promises. This time we want to extend the Lord's invitation to those that are present this evening. If you're here and you've not obeyed the gospel of Christ, we want to encourage you to do so. If you need the prayers of the church, they're extended to you also as together we stand.